Hi, today I'm working on a Music and Sound Model 330, and actually technically it's a Model 333 because it has the optional built-in 3-note electronic door chime. So a standard model is a 330, this is a 333. There was also a 338 which has an 8-note chime module. This was sent in by Robert, and he bought the house a few years ago, and it didn't really kind of work, and I helped him with some troubleshooting, and he got it to the point that he said the radio works fine, but there's no intercom. So he decided to send it in to me to find out what was up with it, and when I got it and bench tested it before I began working on it, it didn't really work that good. Even at that point, if you turned on the radio and you cranked the radio volume, which is like your system-wide household radio level, if you crank that to full and you turn the volume for the speaker in the master station to full, you only got this much sound. It was very, very weak, and that is most likely why he thought there was no intercom functions, because there was so little power available that the intercom just didn't really work correctly. So the set was rebuilt. These are all of the parts that needed to be replaced. And now, if we power it up, turn it on, turn this on.
Original goodness starting at just $5.99. Only at Heart.
Radio plays good. This is only turned up a little bit. We could turn it way up.
Tax not included. Price and participation included.
My boss brings a little.
And that works just fine. So, once I got all of that done, and yes, if you hook up remote speakers to it, the intercom does actually work. I don't have that set up this way for this video because that's not the point of the video, but it does, the intercom does work correctly. Now, the last thing to work on, and the last thing to put back into the set when we put it back together, is the chime. Now, this is what the chime board, his chime board's on the back of the set over here, and I have it connected up. This is what his chime board looks like. This is one that I own, and it's an identical version of his. This set was made around 1977 or so, and you have to give it to Music and Sound that was many years before NuTone came out with their first chime module. So, and actually, I think Music and Sound, the original chime modules, I think came out in like 74, 75. Now, these are not super sophisticated. This is not one of those like microprocessors with firmware in it kind of designs. This is all discrete components that make chime tones. So this is what his looks like. Let me show you what his sounds like. Oh, before I do that, let me mention also that yes, I am somewhat biased because I don't really care for the way Music and Sound chime modules sound. I prefer the NuTone chime modules, which sort of create clear, crisp notes to create a song or whatever it is, and that's what I'm used to. Music and Sound had a different take on things, which maybe because I didn't grow up with them, I'm not as partial to them. I've sort of mentioned that in other videos. So let's go ahead and power this back up, and I'm going to reach back here and make the connection, and you can hear what Robert's chime module sounds like. Ready, set, go. Wow, that's just swell, isn't it? So what you heard is not what it's supposed to sound like. You did get the notes mixed in with all of this sort of musical distortion. I don't even know what to call it exactly. One of the things about Music and Sound chime modules is they were trying for, I think this is my view on it, they were trying for a more melodious sound than just straight, clear notes. And I'm not a musical person, so my description may be a little on the dicey side, but there's this sort of background distortion decay thing that's happening when you activate a properly working Music Sound Chime Module, and it's supposed to make it sound more melodious. Or what's melodious? Well, I had one lady once said, yeah, it's like being in church. And that's probably not a bad description. So they're like that to begin with, and then there's Roberts, and Roberts obviously has a problem. Let's bring it one more time. Hey, that was 8 notes, not 3 notes. Maybe this is really a 338. There's no sticker on it. So I was going on what he told me. Anyway, doesn't matter. So apparently it's an 8 note. So it's a fancier model. But it does this long, after it rings the notes and you have this sort of distortion and there's some fuzziness overlay on the 8 notes. And then you get this long, slow, decaying, dying sound as it gradually weakens and weakens and weakens and weakens and weakens and it finally stops. It's not supposed to be like that. So what are we going to do about it? Well, my job is to try to fix it. So let's look at, we're going to use mine as an example because Roberts is still hooked up. So let me move the camera and we'll take a look at this. So here's a close-up of the Chime Module board. And as you can see, it's reasonably complicated in some ways. So first we have our wire connections. Over here we have a black, a yellow, and a green. These are the wires that go ultimately to a terminal strip where the wires from the outdoor push buttons are connected. The black is a common, the yellow is front, the green is rear. The red wire is one part of the power connection that powers the board. This would be the plus. It doesn't have a minus or ground wire per se. It actually, this bolts into a part of the metal chassis that's attached to the back of the set, and the chassis is the ground. So not my favorite way of doing things, but that's the way they chose to do it. The orange wire here, and there's a white wire which apparently has come off. Okay, so you have to pretend for a second. So there's an orange wire here, and right over here next to this integrated circuit, there's supposed to be a white wire soldered onto this, and apparently with all the moving it around, it snapped off. There's a little diode right here, and it was soldered to the one side of the diode. So the white and the orange are your signal output wires. This is a complicated board. Oh, and there's no schematic for these. I looked through my binder of service manuals and schematics for all music and sound things that I have, and there aren't any. It's an interesting board in that most of the integrated circuits, this one, and this one, are all pretty standard sort of integrated circuits. So what we have here are just your standard sort of run-of-the-mill integrated circuits. There's a decade counter, which is what creates the pace that the tones ring at. There's some flip-flops. There's a hex buffer. There's some gate arrays. There's a single little op amp right here. None of that is extraordinarily fancy. It's just ordinary run-of-the-mill jelly bean sort of parts. However, there's this integrated circuit right here. This is an integrated circuit that I have not been able to identify. It comes from an unusual company. It has a part number on it, which when you Google search the part number, even with the company's name, you don't come up with anything. There's no reference for it at all, so it's a mystery IC. And I've even gone to some of our specialty component suppliers and searched with them. They don't come up with anything either, so I don't know. I have a feeling that this may be a specialized chip. This could be some sort of tone generating chip. You know, there used to be back in the 70s, there used to be chips that were made that could be used like to create home organs or instruments or home piano circuit kind of thing. I don't know. So I don't know what this is, but I think it's key to the way this works. There are some challenges with this. The other thing about this particular board and the way it was designed is you may notice there are these little sort of dark green colored blobs here, 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 these two, this one, 2 down here, 4 over here, and all of these going up here. These are all what are referred to as tag tantalum capacitors. They are different than even though this is a jumbo size one. This is a standard electrolytic capacitor. Electrolytic means it has electrolytic solution in it. It's considered a wet capacitor. Tantalum capacitors are not wet. Tantalum is a substance. They are dry capacitors. They are solid capacitors. Now, tag tantalum capacitors, especially in the 70s, are always very suspect because they were a reasonably newer component at that time, reasonably newer, like they hadn't been around 50 years. The ones that they made in the 70s have a tendency to, one, fail, and two, blow up. They will not tolerate reverse voltage, so if you have a flaw in your circuitry where the voltage is reversed for some unknown reason, these will actually explode, but also they have a tendency to fail. So those of us who work on older equipment, we're very biased against these because they are a known problem. Ultimately, all of these are going to get replaced, but we have to figure out what's wrong with the one in the intercom. And without a schematic, that makes it more challenging. And I know some people would go, well, you could just reverse engineer it and figure it out and draw a schematic. And I suppose if I had an extra week of time on my hands, I could probably do that, but I don't really want to. So we're going to do it. This is more of a seat of the pants kind of repair. These integrated circuits are all common and easy enough to check. And I don't really believe that these are the source of the problem. The little op amp here, I don't think that's a problem because it obviously puts out a signal. This little op amp here would be acting sort of as a preamp, and it boosts up the signal that's generated on the board and is sent into the master station, which then uses the big amplifier to make it heard through the speaker. So there's that. The mystery chip down here, I don't know. It is making tones. You heard the 8 notes. So I don't think that's where this is either. How do we look at this? How do we figure out what approach we're going to take on it? This is the way I look at it. If you boil it down to its essential function, it's a tone generating board. Its purpose is to create tones and create them at a pace that is pleasing to the person listening to it, and that's basically what it is. And then on top of its basic function, creating tones, it has to do this sort of melodious, decaying sound kind of thing that goes on the board, and obviously it's not doing it correctly. This one that I own, the other one's in the set, I did substitute this one and hook it up to the set, and while it is moderately different, it is fundamentally has the same problems. So there are 2 of them now that both have not identical but similar problems. That would lead me to believe that, and they're both about the same age, they're no more than a year or so apart. That would lead me to believe that it is most likely some sort of what I would consider to be an age-related problem. When these systems are installed and they're powered up, this board is powered up 24/7. So in round numbers, it is approximately, it's not quite 50 years old, but it's getting up there. So it's accumulated 425,000 hours of time on it. And if you're looking for components that fail due to age, you have one little electrolytic cap here, which I've already replaced on the other one. That didn't solve any problem, so that's not it. There are all the tag tantalums, which we suspect all the time on anything that has them in it. You got a bunch of resistors, there's some diodes, all the diodes have been checked. There's only 4 transistors. This one over here is a voltage regulator. The voltage regulator is fine. The 4 transistors, I have not taken them out to check them yet. I will do that, but I don't think that's the source of the problem either. You need to look at components that would be used to create the distortion of the tone that the integrated circuits are creating and create that cutoff. You know, we have that, it shuts off and then it's long, slow, dying death down to no signal. To me, that seems like more of a capacitor issue than anything else. So what we're going to do, we're going to order some parts. I don't stock tag tantalums like this because I don't really have any call for them, and modern ones that are made today are fine. So we're going to order a whole raft of these. In fact, I'm going to order enough to do the board in the intercom, to do this board also, and then enough to do another 3 or 4 boards because I like to buy in quantity and get the price break, but that's what's going to happen. So now I'm going to end this video. I'm going to make a list of what I need and put them in. Oh, and one other thing. Sometimes you might be tempted, well, we could take out these because these are regular polar capacitors. They're not regular, but they are capacitors, and they have polarity, plus and minus. You might think that, well, I could just replace them all with little electrolytic capacitors like this. That'd be fine. I got a lot of those, and yes, we do. However, I don't think that's a good choice, because one of the fundamental differences between wet electrolytic capacitors and tantalum capacitors are the resistance of the capacitor itself. Electrolytic capacitors have a higher resistance than tag tantalums do. And you have to think about what the engineer who designed this board may have been thinking about when he chose to use tag tantalums. Now, these, even in the 70s, these were a lot more expensive than an electrolytic capacitor. I don't know how much in the 70s exactly, and they are more expensive today. So probably twice or maybe 2.5 times more expensive. And if you look at a board like this, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. There's 22 of them. It's a fair amount of additional cost considering the fact that Music and Sound may have had to build 25 or 50,000 of these boards. So it's a lot of extra cost when there was a less expensive alternative. So why didn't they go with the less expensive alternative? Don't know for certain, don't have a schematic, and I wasn't there in the room when it happened, but these were chosen specifically for a reason. And this is one of those points, and I have mentioned this to people when I talk to them on the phone sometimes, this is one of those occasions where you have to fight the urge to think that you're smarter than the guy who designed this. The guy who designed this was probably pretty smart and probably had a lot of experience and had a really good reason for using tantalum capacitors. And who am I to think that I'm smarter than he is? These obviously were chosen for a good reason. And the thing with bad tantalum capacitors in the 70s, that's something that didn't really show up for 10 or 15 years later. So he wouldn't have known that. But they were chosen for a reason. I don't think that I'm smarter than the guy who designed the board. So we're going to go with the exact replacement because that's the sensible choice. You know, one of the things you have to consider when you're repairing things is you don't want to introduce new variables into what you're working on because that creates problems if you do all of that and it changes it somehow and it doesn't necessarily solve the problem or it changes the problem from one thing to another. You've wasted a lot of time and effort because it's just not the right thing to do. So I'm going to order a bunch of tag tantalums. The other thing that's challenging about this board, and I did a search yesterday, almost all these integrated circuits are common enough that they're all readily available. However, these are all through-hole dip packages, and through the major parts suppliers, while all of these individual ICs technically are available, nobody has them in through-hole dip packages. They're all surface mount packages now. And that's a total pain in the neck because I do want to have, while I don't think I need them at the moment, I do want to have these on hand in case I get a board in that needs them. And now I got to go to a secondary supplier to try to find that, and that probably won't be much of a problem. But when you say secondary supplier, that's code word for more expensive. Not a lot more, but a little bit more. And then we have the mystery chip, which I still have to figure out what that is. And what I'm probably actually going to do with this is I'm going to send a message to the company that made it originally and ask them really, really nicely if maybe you could please tell me what it is and maybe you can send me a data sheet for it so I have some idea of what I'm dealing with here, because I don't know at the moment. Anyway, that's just me rambling on and on and on about some of the things you have to figure out when you're working on something like Music and Sound. Oh, I guess it's a 338. Hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it might be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications. And every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.